All right, we are live, so we're going to go ahead and get started. If we could, it is Tuesday, March 21st, 2023, and this is our study session. We'd like to start by indicating who is here. We're going to go ahead and start with Connie.
Connie Burgess.
Karen Winder. Chris Wynn.
Julie Jackson.
Kim Chandler.
Todd Hopper.
Rich Nye.
And Nicole McDermott. All right, we'd like to welcome everybody here. The first thing that we have is we do have consent items that we've had for a few days. We've been able to ask questions or get any information that we needed. Is there any other questions or anything that we need to ask about that? All right, then I'll entertain a motion.
I make a motion that we approve the consent agenda. I'll second.
All right, we've had a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, those pass. And we are going to move on to the main part of this study session, which is our PBIS, or Positive Behavior Intervention and Supports. And we're going to turn the time over to the lovely Judy Peterson.
Oh, you're so nice. I always get really nervous, even though I think I know that school board members are basically nice. Yeah, basically.
I like to keep you guessing, Judy.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, everybody is basically nice, right? But sometimes, you know, things just happen. But this is exciting to be here today because I was thinking about previous presentations on this topic, and I think Karen and Connie are the only two that would have been around for previous, maybe Nicole, okay. Yeah, that's true. But at any rate, it's an exciting topic. I'm excited to be here. And so, good people, I hope this will be good information for you. I'd like to introduce my team of amazing and strong professionals. So Angie Jones, if you wanted to stand or raise your hand. She's the Associate Director in our department for MTSS. And then we have two of our coaches here, Chad Kuhn and Shanna Bingham. Chad was previously a teacher, language arts teacher, and all things as a systems support coach for a long time, and is now one of our coaches. He was most recently at Granger High before coming here. And then Shanna's been a kindergarten teacher. I think kindergarten teachers are the best people in the universe because they have to be so on top of their game all day long with Kleenexes and zippers and tying shoes and all that stuff. And I think I mentioned she was at Pioneer. And then Kay Polton-Tim, you've met. She has done a board presentation information session previously. And I apologize for my hoarse voice. I don't know what happened. Yesterday afternoon, we were meeting around the table in my office and I coughed, and then this came out. So I don't have a fever. I don't have a runny nose. I just have a hoarse voice. So anyway, all right, here we go. I've got some notes. I hope it's okay if I refer to my notes because I want to make sure that I cover everything as best as I can. So first off, acronyms. MTSS is what we refer to as our multi-tiered system of supports. PBIS is affectionately our positive behavior interventions and supports. So I just want to be really casual about our meeting today. And when you've got questions or concerns, go ahead and ask. And if I can't answer, Superintendent and I can help out. We've got Rick and John who have been in schools and lived and breathed these two acronyms and initiatives, and also the good people from my department. So we'll go from there.
Judy, I'm sorry to have a question on the very first slide. MTSS, that refers to systems of support, both for behavior and for academics, right?
Absolutely, yeah, and social skills and dispositions. And anything else, think about it in terms of your own life and your own systems of support. You look at your family, for example. You have your immediate family, those who maybe live still under the same roof in your house. Then you have occasion at times to reach out to other members of your family, extended family, who maybe need to pick up a child or to meet a need or help you get someplace. Then you go to that next level of support. You've still got your family at that tier 1 level, but sometimes you have to reach out for some additional support. Then there come those times in your world where your immediate family is just rocked upside down. You go to that next level of support, those that are extended around you closely, and you get the help you need. But sometimes there's only that one area of support that you know you can go where you get the best and the most. You still get the support of those living under your roof and those close circle extended family members, but you've all got that go-to person. So as we talk about a multi-tiered system of support, you can use that in any facet of your life. Doctors use it all the time. The first route they give you is, take a Tylenol or do this or do that. And then they tier the supports they give you based on your needs. And so at the center of our multi-tiered system of support is really each and every student individually as their needs rise. Okay, good question. All right, so I'm going to just give you some background information as you have had a chance to look at these slides. But Granite School District has long been using a tiered supports framework. In my experience for the 10 years that I've been in this current position, and it's an evidence-based framework. We use it to make decisions about what students need and how to help them be successful in their academics and their behavior and their social skills and dispositions. The framework is grounded by data. It incorporates good decision-making and problem-solving practices, good instructional strategies, but with student learning and student growth always at the center. So as you think about the tiers of supports, we look at it in terms of the green being where most of our kids live and breathe every part of their school experience. Then we have some kids who require a little bit more. And in addition to the supports that they receive through the general core curriculum, they also get that additional support. And then there are some students that rise to that level of some personalized, individualized support, and they get the other two tiers. That's just a guarantee of our services in education and long been in that realm. So now consider a multi-tiered system of support just for behavior. What does that look like? What does it feel like? I think it's just fun and it's exciting, and it has really been a game changer for our schools and our kids in helping them to best understand what the expectations are so they know what to do. Okay, I want you to think about the last time you had to drive in one of those roundabouts. There are a couple out in West Valley. If you're by Armstrong Elementary, there's a roundabout there, a couple of them. There is a roundabout up on 23rd East, just off of I-80. That one always confuses me. But you have to experience knowing what the expectations are in that roundabout before you really dare enter it. What's the first and most basic expectation when you're approaching one of those roundabouts? Yeah, which one to get off.
Yield to the on.
Yield. Okay, who has the most power? I don't really know, but I think it's the person closest to the inside. But then you've got to watch for that person to leave. So kids need to know their expectations. I think what COVID did for all of us is really help us to reestablish our expectations for social distancing, for making sure that when we cough or sneeze, it's not in someone's face. In schools, down one side of the hall, up the other side of the hall. The expectations are everywhere, even at Costco. When you stand in the line to get your pizza or hot dog or whatever you're getting, you have to file along. So having expectations in our schools is as natural as the experiences we have in the real world. And we really hope that we'll elevate the level of understanding for expectations with our students so that they will be better equipped when they're out in the bigger world of society and social interactions. So the final statement on this slide, I just want to read to you. It says, PBIS follows the concept that students will best meet behavior expectations if they know what the expectations are and can use a common language to describe their behavior at school. This next slide I love, and I want you to read it aloud with me. So let's start. If a child doesn't know how to read, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to swim, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to multiply, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to drive, we teach. But if a child doesn't know how to behave, and you kind of want to go to that level of word that we don't want to use. But let's say that and fill in the blank with the appropriate word. If a child doesn't know how to behave, we teach. I have a series of quotes that I just keep on my phone. And when you think about behavior, I want you to think about this. It says, beneath every behavior is a feeling, and beneath every feeling is a need. And when we meet that need, rather than focus on the behavior, we begin to deal with the cause and not the symptom. So as we go through this presentation and this discussion today, I want you to be thinking about the feelings that kids have and how our work is all about prevention and helping to prevent things going in the wrong direction, but to help kids better understand what the expectations are at school, out in the world, so that they're better equipped to be successful in their behavior. Any questions before we go on? You're so well behaved. I certainly appreciate your paying attention. What good people you are. Okay, PBIS is not a curriculum. I want to make sure that you know that. It's not something that we purchase or hope our teachers and other staff members learn in a one-day professional development training. It's an ongoing commitment to supporting students, educators, and families through systems of change. And when you implement PBIS well, students experience improved behaviors at school, socially. They have higher academic outcomes because once their behaviors are in check and you have a calm and reasonably supported environment in the classroom, learning is elevated to a higher level. Schools and programs also see a reduction in major offenses and minor offenses and suspensions. Attendance improves. Now, we do have to remember that we're living in the post-COVID world, and COVID had an impact on our students and staff members unlike anything we've ever experienced. And so, although we've been implementing PBIS in our schools for an awfully long time, COVID kind of tipped it upside down and rattled it a little bit, and we have a lot of behaviors that We need to address and help kids relearn expectations, reteach those expectations so that we can get back to where we were pre-COVID. When we think about implementing an initiative like PBIS through a multi-tiered system lens, it's like, okay, well, how do we do this? As with any educational initiative, it begins with the school leadership team, and the building leader really takes a hold of it, identifies with the leadership team what initiative to pursue. Sometimes there's a little bit of nudging from the district office to help schools see the value added by the initiatives, but it really comes down to a group of very committed and highly competent professionals in the schools who begin initiatives. With positive behavior interventions and supports, teams have used data to identify the behaviors that need to be addressed and consequently the expectations that are missing. They look at the behaviors really that they want to see and create those as expectations. Teams organize expectations as a brand for their school. After that, they identify what the expectations look like in each area of the school. So in your schools, do you have that brand or that list of expectations that are on your mind that you remember in the last school that you visited? Would anybody like to share?
The entire Skyline Network has RISE, that they have come together as a group to talk about how they're going to perpetuate it starting in the elementary school and how that's going to progress. And I love the collaboration, and it's because it's at all those schools that I remember it, because it's the same through all of them.
Well, our coaches put together, we've never done this before, and I think this is really exciting.
Oh, can I just also say, they also today I heard in their network PTA meeting that they're going to connect it to Graduate of Granite, and each of those letters is going to connect to one of the Graduate of Granite deals, and they're going to call it a RISE, and the A is going to be for attendance, the attendance piece.
Chad, do you want to get one to Rick and John and the back row there? Well, take a look. So the way we've laid this out, every one of our schools is implementing PBIS at some level. Most of them are at a high level of implementation and have sustained PBIS over the years. And as you look down on the right-hand side, or the left-hand side, you can see the names of the schools. In the center, it has either their brand, or if they just go straight to the expectations and don't have a brand per se, but they have, like, let's look at Cypress, for example. Any student at Cypress, you say what the expectations are. It's attend, learn, attend, earn, grow. And that's the way it goes. So look at your schools, the schools in your network. You've got Skyline on there. Theirs is RISE. They hold that so close to their heart. They're not willing to do anything to change that ever and ever. They're way into this, into their resilience, integrity, support, and excellence. So once the school teams come up with their expectations and brand it as part of their school climate and culture, it doesn't come without a lot of really fierce discussion at the school level, because school teams grapple with that notion of reaching consensus, as does the entire faculty and staff, and it's pretty cool. Any questions on any of those? So the next slide just shows some examples of what those brands look like. A couple years ago, we had we had connections to a graphic designer, and that person was able to do a lot of the branding for our schools, and that was pretty cool. But it just makes me really proud when I walk into a school and I see what the expectations for behavior are right there, front and center. The next thing that we do is explicitly teach the expectations. If you were to be in one of our PBIS professional learning opportunities a few years back, we were able to get the blueprints of every school that wanted them, that showed the whatever Don calls it, the overlook, the grid, or the plans, the layout of the school, the architectural design and everything. And so as we introduced the plan of the school to the school teams, we said, we want you to identify where you're experiencing the biggest behavior issues. And a lot of the schools talked about, at that time, places that you would imagine would be the spike of behavior issues in any school would probably be in the lunchroom, outside. Sometimes it's wherever kids can't be seen. And they started to pinpoint those areas. And then they started to look at the kinds of supports that they would need then in those areas to help reinforce positive behavior and reteach behaviors that were not that positive. So this is an example of what we call a matrix of how our schools identify each area of the school, and then each of the expectations they want to achieve, and what the expectation for behavior would be in each one of those areas. And if you're in a school, you'll see that the expectation poster for the classrooms are well displayed in the classrooms, in the hallway, in the bathrooms, playgrounds, lunchroom, media center, front office, even the drinking fountain, all areas of the school have been clearly marked and identified with their appropriate expectation. After schools identify how they will, what their expectations are going to be, and they teach them, then comes the challenge of reinforcing the good behavior. This is where schools get a little bit crazy because kids love it. They want to get involved and they want to be part of it. So they identify, each individual school then with their team can identify how they're going to reinforce students for their positive behaviors. Generally, they give tickets or cards or that are distributed by school staff. And they will usually have I caught you doing this behavior, and then check it off. And then kids can keep their cards, and they can earn points toward being in the Principal's 200 Club. Some of our schools have Yes Day, a day when kids can bring a stuffy to school or a pillow or an alternate seating thing. Some of our schools will have Wear Your Funny Hat Day if you meet a certain expectation. For our junior high and high school kids, it might look like get a friend and get to the front of the lunch line pass, or early before the bell rings to your next class kind of thing. So kids take it seriously. They want the reinforcement, and they want to keep track of their points or whatever it is they have in their school to benefit. And so you can see here some other reinforcement visuals, what you can get for 5 tickets to 40 tickets, what a school store looks like. Sometimes the school stores are run by the kids too, and that makes it even more appropriate for kids to see the full continuum of what it means to behave appropriately and meet the requirements of the expectations. So then we have to get to the point where Some of our students, well, I would even say a few students, who, after many opportunities to demonstrate that they understand the expectations, they get caught. And so this graphic on this slide is what we call a decision tree. This one is just one that's represented by Eisenhower Junior High. We brought a couple others if we get to the point where you'd like to really dig into decision trees. But helping our students learn appropriate expectations for behavior in school is really critical to their success, because sometimes the behavior just gets in the way of their learning. So we go back to the quote that we talked through earlier, and we're reminded that sometimes, if it's not the expectation or the behavior we see, we have that tendency to want to do something that's not teaching. But we have to remind ourselves that, as in every area of our work in schools, that we need to follow a process. The thing that I like most about the decision tree is it's fair and equitable. And when kids understand what the expectations are and they're taught their behavior, when they understand that when a decision is made that requires attention to the decision tree, that they can see how their own personal involvement in the process is pretty powerful, that they're in control. They have the opportunity to meet the expectation of the behavior. And if not, then we move through the decision tree. But the goal is to keep all of our kids away from the red areas, which lead to an office referral. So there's not a lot of explanation on the decision tree when it gets to the level of an office referral, because that's where parent involvement comes into play. And if the behavior is such, as identified by Eisenhower Junior High on their chart, those are the kinds of things that need attention from an administrator, and making sure that parents are involved in understanding and knowing what has happened in that student's individual situation or circumstance. So there you have that, correcting behavior. Now, I want to get to this exciting thing. Whenever you're doing an initiative and it gets to the point where you're sustaining the practices of whatever it is you're choosing to do in a school for instruction or academic instruction or behavioral instruction, sometimes over time there's a tendency to drift. And drift might be where schools and teams would get a little bit complacent. And maybe teachers are not quite handing out as many reinforcements as they once did. Or maybe kids aren't quite as excited about the expectations as they once were. Well, then we look for ways to augment and enhance and reignite and invigorate our schools. And you know what? I think the characteristics of the graduate of Granite are going to do just that for PBIS. So I'm excited about this new opportunity. Schools can shore up their behavior expectations post-COVID in a new way. And this will really keep our initiative going with the same excitement and enthusiasm that we began with. And that's a tough thing to do, but I think the time is right that we can do that. When something like the characteristics of the graduate of Granite come along, it really is an opportunity to revitalize. Some schools will take the indicators and include them in their matrix, and they won't make new expectations. And I've got an example of that. So this slide maybe needed more explanation. So this takes one of the characteristics off of the graduate of Granite poster of responsibility. And then the school, in this particular case, is taking that characteristic and then teaching how responsibility is really about the expectations for behavior in the classroom, in the hallway, and so on and so forth. I think this is really exciting. Other schools, they've all jumped on this. I mean, the thing about our job at the district office is we provide a framework, we provide a structure, we can provide standards and indicators, but the real work happens at the school. And we have amazingly bright, capable, competent people in our schools who take the initiatives and just go with it. And look at Jefferson Junior High, for example. They've taken the characteristics of Graduate of Granite and they've incorporated them now into their expectations for their school-wide positive behavior interventions and support. The other chart is from Pioneer Elementary. And you can see they've got an if I do or an if I don't, and in the middle, the characteristics. And I love this. I'm so excited to see where we're going to go with the characteristics. Some schools will change their expectations. Others may just choose to incorporate the characteristics into their current expectations. But this will allow opportunity for reteaching unlike we've experienced as everybody plans and prepares for this. As we wrap this up, our study session, just by way of reminder, we're talking about a tiered systems of support, recognizing that most kids will benefit from amazing and good, positive Tier 1 instruction for academics and behavior. Then there are some kids that will, in addition to that support, need a little bit more, and some kids will rise to the level of more intentional and focused support. And then just some positive outcomes of PBIS: increases student engagement, empowers kids to play a central role in their educational experience. It really does reduce teacher burnout, because when kids recognize and understand and are taught expectations, they really do meet the level of the expectation. And it really does help all of our other education practices to be better. In addition to keep it going, we don't have the characteristics that come along every 4 or 5 years, but we do monthly professional learning for school teams and or individuals. We have a PBIS topic of the month that we differentiate elementary and secondary. Sometimes it's on a resource or support. Sometimes we just go back to the 4 components, the 4 pillars of PBIS, but ongoing. We provide professional learning. Last week we had our professional learning on reinforcement, and we had 84 at least faces on the screens, not knowing how many school teams were represented on those screens, as some chose to meet in groups. But we're seeing a lot of positive work in our schools to sustain and jump on the opportunity now to align the characteristics of a graduate of Granite with PBIS. So that's it.
I have some questions.
Thank you, Chris.
So I have a couple schools that are kind of struggling with PBIS a little bit, and a lot of it is due to one of my schools in particular had a lot of teacher turnover. And so when they're trying to bring in a new team and new people to try to teach this in the schools, what kind of supports do they get, and how long does it take to really implement and get all staff on board with this?
Chad and April and I were talking about this earlier today, because we were anticipating what kinds of questions you might have for us, and this was one of them. And Chad has a chart on the side of his desk that, what's it called, Chad, your chart? And the key feature in sustainability that will take a school down is change in administration and high turnover among teachers. And Chad and April and I were talking that it's almost like we need a transition meeting for admin specific to PBIS and MTSS, because when it's not there, the loss is huge. And it needs to be also part of the beginning of every school year, as you're bringing your staff together, as our schools come together as a school staff, as PTA people come together as part of those meetings or in different meetings, community events and activities, anytime warrants an opportunity to revisit that. I was at an elementary school during a Halloween parade one year, and they had a PowerPoint presentation going on in the gym as all the kids were snaking through with their fancy dancy costumes on, and it was teaching the parents about the expectations for the school. And I thought, go figure, at a Halloween activity. So that we have our coaches. We have 3 coaches and a specialist to help support our 89 plus or minus schools. And they can help, but boy, if we had a system in place to really help with the transition of admin from one school to the next, that would really help. We do that with kids. So during the month of May, our social workers and psychologists at the elementary level will be meeting with the counselors, psychs, and social workers at the junior high level, and the counselors at the junior high level will meet with the counselors at the high school level and just share transition plans, 504s, IEPs, kids who have trauma or extenuating circumstances or challenges, just so that there's not that learning loss about an individual student. Does that answer? But
Yeah, I
not
love
a good
that.
solution.
I would love to see that. Now, would this be, so if a school needs some, let's say a principal or someone notices like my staff is just not quite getting on board, is that who they would contact you and say,
Yeah.
hey, we could use some extra support. I have 10 new teachers this year or
Right.
whatever, so.
You can contact any one of us. You can contact Angie Jones, me, or any one of our coaches. We do have on our website a list of all of the coaches and their school assignments. We didn't bring that handout down tonight. We didn't know if that would come in handy, but each of our 3 coaches and our MTSS specialist all have assigned schools.
Okay. I think sometimes they just get overwhelmed because in the moment, it's hard to like go, oh, now we should bring in something else to do. And I know these principals are working so hard to do that with their PLCs, anytime they can get to just kind of reinforce that. But when you have a lot of new staff, it's very hard to get that.
Do they do that at all during onboarding? Do they cover?
Yes,
Do they cover it?
we are a key part of
Okay.
onboarding.
I just want to make sure.
Yes, and so I'm so glad you brought that up. So for many of our PBIS coaches, their first introduction to what their job is or was or is going to be is that fire hose of, okay, your first assignment is teacher onboarding, because that happens before school starts. And our coaches have done an excellent job under Angie's leadership in doing that. And then they provide some support occasionally through the course of the school year at the request of the intervention and instructional coaches in onboarding or onboarding coaches.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Is that all you have?
Nicole, I think
That's
you
all on
had
my
a
list right
question.
now. Yeah.
Karen, did you have any?
No hard questions. Karen, please.
I got a good one. What happens when PBIS goes wrong? And what I mean by that is there are sometimes in our schools where teachers are trying their best, but these office referrals come, right? So kids are sent to the office, and then all of a sudden, this same kid comes back with toys and trinkets in the classroom from the principal's office. So I understand the principal's not trying to punish, but it's not a good message when the disruptive kid walks in with toys and treats, and the other kids are like, wait a minute, if I act out, I get to go to the principal's office and come back with this. And you may joke, but I know this is happening. And so Chris brought up the question, what happens, when principals need support because maybe their teachers are new? What happens when teachers need support because administration may or may not be following recommended behavior correction processes?
Yeah, I can't speak for administrators and what happens in those situations, but we provide opportunity to help our administrators through reteaching too. I mean, that's the best we can do. When those kinds of things are brought to our attention or John's attention, we get out there and help. But I think those are exceptions, really, honestly and truly. And I did want to share one other slide with you because
Just to be fair, I hope they're exceptions, but I'm looking around and I have board members nodding at me like, happening in my school, happening in my school, happening in my school.
I think
So
the
this
issue
could be
is-
something that I'm sensing needs to be looked at and not just swept under there's probably just a few things going on over here. I actually think this is a wider problem than we believe it is.
And I think it's really, we do really good at the tier one. I think I have loved seeing as I've gone around, every single school has something in there. They have that. Tier one is awesome. As far as tier two and tier three, sometimes that's where, at least from a teacher's point of view, that's where we're dropping the ball a little bit, where maybe it's not. I love this, that we have the discipline decision tree. That's my question. Does every school have this? And are we all, every school does have one? Okay. And are they all following it? Because there's some of those that I'm like, I mean, and I'm just speaking from my experience of things that I've either seen at a school or honestly my own school, but I feel as a teacher, maybe we're not seeing it. And how can we educate our teachers a little bit better that this is really what's happening? Because does that make sense? Maybe we're just not seeing it.
I know we can't make assumptions based on a toy or something that looks like it was playtime. So we have to trust the process. We have to trust that we're equitably and fairly following the decision tree. Superintendent, did you want to weigh in on that, or John or Rick?
Can I just follow up on my comment? I'm not one to assume things, but I happen to know that the same child is coming to the office multiple times a day.
The other thing that so take a look at these decision trees. We've got some samples. The coaches pulled a couple of elementary samples and a couple of secondary samples, and we tried to go full circle in the district, east side, west side, middle of the district. So as you're looking over those, I'd also like you to look at this slide. I didn't include this in the slides that I sent out earlier because I wanted to take more time on these. So to help you understand what we do have in place at Tier 2. Sometimes we do have students that have behaviors that need attention more frequently than others. And so a student who requires some additional time and some level of intensity, every one of our schools is funded a BHA. Most of our schools we're almost back at fully staffed BHAs. We've still got 20 or more schools to staff, but we lost a lot of people during COVID. But we have BHAs, and BHAs are behavioral health assistants. We oversee BHAs from our department. They are to help with gen ed students who need additional behavior supports. They come to training once a month. And they're just really good people. In fact, some of our BHAs have been around for 10 or more years, and it's really awesome. The other thing that we've added, this is our third year of having what we call behavior analysts, or BCBAs, board certified behavior analysts for gen ed, and they can begin consulting with school teams about students who identify with severe or high-level behaviors at any time. We do staffing every Thursday morning with our BCBAs to talk through the referrals that have come in from the schools with our students who are demonstrating these high-level behaviors. And then we have on our case management team, our coordinators for psychs, social workers, our 3 BCBAs, Angie and myself. And we case manage these that come to our attention. And I don't know how many students we've had so far, but we're seeing a lot of students and they're making huge growth. After interventions and time spent with the BCBAs and the BCBA behavior analysts, helping to establish good expectations and practices for reinforcement to improve behavior at the schools. It's going really well. The other intervention that we have out in our schools that really helps at the Tier 2 level is check-in, check-out. Chad, who's back there, is our resident check-in, check-out expert. And it's a program that was developed by one of the professors in special education at the University of Utah, Leanne Hawken. And we have been implementing check-in, check-out as a good Tier 2 intervention, evidence-based intervention for some years, and it's highly effective. Then the next slide, I need to unskip it too. I just wanted to point out what we do with some of our, there again, these are our gen ed behaviors, wraparound services, and that's getting everybody together to help with the student being able to learn a different behavior or a replacement behavior for the one that seems to be getting in the way. And this is where we bring our school psychologists and social worker, our behavior specialists and others, our parents and administrators together to problem solve on how to best meet the needs of kids at that high level. Then our behavior specialists have also developed a really good menu of strategies and supports to try with kids for different behaviors. For example, every year at the beginning of the year, it's kindergartners running away. For whatever reason, they elope quickly and inconspicuously sometimes. And if you can go the first couple days of school without losing a kindergartner, you're in pretty good shape. But the behavior strategies that we've identified and put together in this document really are addressing those kinds of behaviors. And those same behaviors will manifest at other grade levels and ages too. We have high school kids that elope and run and hide, and we try to change those behaviors as well. So this is just a little snippet of the supports that we have at those tiers. Questions about any of those? John?
Not a question, but the answer. I still have the need to answer.
Chris's
The question that you had, because it was a good question. What we have found is that if you go back to those 4 pillars, that we're not all schools are perhaps at the same level of implementation with those 4 pillars as others. And where teachers get the most frustrated is when we don't communicate back to the teacher what the consequence may have been.
That's a good
when they went to the office. And if the student is reintroduced into the classroom on their own, sometimes the student shares with the class misinformation as to what could or could not have happened. And so what we've been trying to do is have them use Educator's Handbook, which is one tool they can use to communicate back to the staff what has occurred. Or another good strategy is to loop back to the teacher before the end of the day and talk to them. Or even if you have the time, rather than have the student just reintroduce back into the class, have someone go with the student to talk through what's happened so the teacher is aware of what's transpired. Because otherwise either they don't get accurate information or because a lot of times students, to save face, will say things differently to their peers than what that could have transpired as well.
Well, and I think that in this, and I can talk to you after about this specific case, but I think there's some breakdown, back to my original question, what happens when this process goes awry? Because if the same kid is going to the office every day, then there's something, the behaviors are not being corrected at the right level, so. Yeah, what needs to change to either communicate those expectations better or to correct the behavior better? Or is it time to call the parent or I don't know what the answer is, but I just know there's scenarios like this going on.
Sure, or if the parent's been contacted, have we set up a face-to-face meeting? Have we created some kind of plan both jointly with the parent and the school on next steps and so forth? So those are good points.
And then, or present. Oh, go ahead. Oh,
I think the reality, this is a great question, Karen, because this is the hard knocks life of a junior high assistant principal.
Yes, it is.
And one of and having been there, you learn the hard way on some mistakes. So sometimes mistakes are made where you're taking a look at the situation and perhaps it hasn't had time to calm down and you've sent the student back and you learn really quickly there's some other things that I need to do. John mentioned Educator's Handbook and just that communication. I think Educator's Handbook was invented by junior high teachers and administrators just to have that communication back and forth and leveraging that so a teacher is able to see the interventions that have been made with that student is helpful. John's piece as well on that parent, and here's where sometimes I found, and I think this is a reality, is sometimes you have a difficult parent. And working through what's happening with the student and the behavior and how the parent sees it and whether the parent agrees with the school and what's going on or not, and having to navigate that as the administrator can sometimes result in some delays or some confusion or some challenges for that administrator to be able to just apply the next consequence, if you will, or support, if you will. There's a real science to it, and these decision trees really help give that framework and science. But there's also an art in the communication and in the relationships with the parent. And because there's so much complexity to it, there's a lot of opportunity for mistakes or for some disconnects as well. So it's continually working through. A lot of assistant principals rely on the experience of their principal to help inform how to navigate some of those things. And oftentimes the principal will also help with navigating, especially on that parent side issue. But absolutely is not a foolproof thing.
If I just may add, the communication sometimes is helpful both ways, not only the administration with the teacher as to what's happening, but the teacher with the administration as to what they're experiencing, because sometimes the administration only has partial information and they're not aware of the extent of everything that's gone on in the classroom as well.
In all fairness, though, can I say it's really hard when you're trying to manage 35 kids and you have that one and you're like, just go. I can't today. And so it's hard to get that communication. So I appreciate that we have Educator's Handbook, and I think that is a tool that we are using. But with the understanding that, that communication has to also come later sometimes from the teacher as well, in all fairness.
I agree. I think teachers, sometimes there definitely is a personality conflict between the child and the teacher. And if that is the case, I would hope that there was willingness to transfer. I transferred one of my children out of a school because I knew what the teacher was like and there was no replacement. And I said, I don't want him to get such a bad reputation and hate school that I got permission and transferred him to a different school. I think that teachers have to be involved sometimes in that, and if there is that conflict, please, fix it somehow. Yeah.
I wanted to speak after you.
Okay. So a couple concepts were also introduced here that I think we need to elaborate just a little bit more on. One is taking a look at this systematically across the district, and to the degree to which the expectations, like we want our students to have with PBIS, we also communicate with their administrators and teachers. And so we have processes to do that. So if you wouldn't mind, Judy, just speaking to a little bit about TFI, or Tiered Fidelity Inventory, or SET data, or BOC, and how we as a district are saying, hey, to what extent are we evaluating, making sure that our systems are put in place, and how we've gone about that fundamentally.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. So last year, word got to us that the superintendent wanted to know where all of our schools were in terms of their implementation level of PBIS. So our coaches conducted what we call a SET. That's, I'm not going to remember, school evaluation tool. There we go. And they did every one of our schools plus a couple of programs like transition services, and that might have been maybe Roosevelt transition also. At any rate, that means that each coach, they paired up. They went in teams of 2. They met with the administrator to review their matrix, their decision tree, and the questions that were on the set that needed to be answered by administrators. Then they had to go through the school and randomly identify kids. So it was like during a class passing time at the secondary schools, or lunch or recess, and ask the kids what the expectations are for their school. And they had to recite them. Then they had to go through and check to make sure that the signage was there and appropriately placed in the school. And then there are a few other things, but that is the evaluation tool that we use district-wide. And we charted that, and we had the implementation scores. We could pull those up for you. So that was then. Now, fast forward just a little bit, we have the strategic plan. PBIS is a big component in the strategic plan. And now we're looking at a new tool to measure the level of implementation for Granite District, and it's called the Tiered Fidelity Inventory. And we will be using that district-wide as we measure the level of implementation for PBIS going forward. And the thing that is really critical about the TFI, it's not just a go take a look at the school to see and hear and learn of the level of implementation. It goes through the tiers. So there's a tier 1 section, a tier 2 section, and a tier 3 section, and goes in much greater depth and level of detail.
Thank you. Just to reemphasize the point, as we're taking a look at fidelity of implementation, that we're doing so systematically to be able to address a very specific challenge that we're seeing in our schools, and that all of you have seen as you visit the schools, is what do we do when we have some, a handful of students per the pyramid, a handful of students that are engaging behaviors untoward or compromising the educational experience of others. How do we teach the child with their parent to be able to engage and learn what it means to behave in class, what it means to behave at recess, if that's where the incidences are occurring, and then be able to make those improvements. The other piece there that was also introduced, I think deserves a little bit of elaboration, is Educator's Handbook, and how it's used and how we're using that in connection with parents, particularly as you think of the decision trees. Step 1, step 2, verbal warning, redirection, stop and think. Teachers are doing this all the time. Stop and go. There's something more in a child's behavior that requires some teacher action, and we work to what it looks like to teach a child, but then we we document that in Educator's Handbook and say, okay, certain child engaged in such and such a behavior, this is the intervention, the phone call home, we document that, working with the parents, and of course, step 4, parent contact. We're going to document that too in step 5, all in an effort to determine whether or not our interventions are having the intended impact that we would hope that they have. But do you want to speak a little bit more to Educator's Handbook and the data that's used there and how long it's on file and all the above?
Yeah, so that was a question that we anticipated as well. And where do these data live and breathe and go? And so Educator Handbook is an outside tool that we purchase every year. There are a couple of tools and resources out there that help us in identifying the minors and the majors of behavior. And as you look at the decision trees, you'll get an idea of what a minor behavior is and what a major behavior is. So those are coded in Educator Handbook, and they don't go anyplace. They don't follow the student. The data in that system are archived at the end of every year by Educator Handbook, and they're archived here at the district office in our CCR department, and that's it. The only data that travel with a student, that follow a student, are the data points that we monitor and manage in Discovery. So that's grades, attendance, assessment data, any behavior that's required by law to report to USBE, and then demographic information such as grade level, birth date, those kinds of things. But that's it. So I know that we've been asked before by parents who have called and said, I just got an office referral notice regarding my student in 6th grade at whatever elementary school. Is that going to follow them to 7th grade at Matheson Junior High? No, it doesn't. And so no one has access to the Educator Handbook data or any of the student information. Even teachers only have access to the behavior data of their students. Am I correct on that, Chad?
Yes, and they can request additional access to other students. Like if I'm on a basketball coach and I want to track my team, I can set up a roster for that.
Okay. Anything else on Educator Handbook? But basically, it's used when you pull up a report, it can show you the frequency of behaviors over the course of a day. So the time of the day, you can probably in your mind visualize where you might see those peaks during the day. Beginning of the day in a high school, not a lot of behaviors. Beginning of the day in our elementary schools, a lot of behaviors. Schools are doing some really amazing school-wide circle times, meeting times, class meeting times to get kids ready to learn at the beginning of the day. And those are a result of their PBIS system and recognizing that, hey, we've got to switch things up a little bit to get kids ready to learn. And that's just reminders of what the expectations are at the beginning of the day. But yeah, so the data that follows students is really data specific to their performance in school. Did that help? Anyone else have a question about the data?
Actually, so you said that safe school violations would follow them.
Yes, that's required by law. Yeah.
And my question about that is there a reporting time frame? Like, are they supposed to have it reported at a certain time so that it's in the system, do you know what I mean, to track faster?
For the safe school violations?
For any like office referral or whatever, because I know sometimes, I think this was in one of my schools, this came up at just a conversation, but they said that sometimes the teachers don't turn in their requests or whatever, or their explanation in a timely way. Yeah.
That goes back to the school and what their procedures and processes are.
So they all have different type, okay.
Yeah, that's part of their decision tree.
Go ahead, Kim.
Kim? Oh, you got a question?
Yeah, thank you. I want to touch a little bit back on the administrative level questions that we have, because I have had almost exact feedback as Karen's had, that's happening at various schools, that teachers don't want to send kids to the office because then they come back and every day they act up because they know they can go to the office and have a better time there than they would dealing with the stress of the classroom. I am curious specifically what incentives, what pressure we give at the administrative level in terms of discipline numbers. I know we've publicly stated that we have a goal to decrease our discipline referral rates by 10%. And I frankly am concerned that in some cases that pressure or perhaps incentives, if those exist, lead to this kind of behavior. We end up not addressing something properly because we don't want to have a discipline referral counting against us, right?
So I call that a corruptibility of an indicator. And so that is something, for that reason, we want to make sure that we have accurate information and have confidence in that reporting feature. And so in my site visits, for an example, there's not an incentive to meet that goal other than you want to improve the climate and culture on a campus, right? You would want children to respond to the interventions and their behaviors to improve. That's the incentive is how do we create a campus where children are getting the help they need to be successful at school. As far as what we'll see this year, likely, as we look at our continual improvement plans where they've set that goal to decrease behavior, it's actually, and to no surprise, resulted in greater fidelity of use of the decision tree and the documentation in Educator's Handbook, which, as you can imagine, isn't going to be a decrease, but a increase.
And we've seen that this year.
But an accurate representation of what actually is occurring. So it sets a new baseline, frankly, which is what we'd want to be able to do, is have confidence in these data to be able to make determinations. And so
You're saying an increase in office referrals?
yes.
Oh,
We've seen
Of accurately documented and fidelity use of the system and the expectation.
And I appreciate the superintendent bringing that up, because whatever you pay attention to gets attention. And so as he's out visiting with schools and asking them how they're doing on their ed handbook, or how they're recording their minors and their majors, it's like, oh, wow, I'm going to be more mindful of that and do a better job of that. And we've seen a huge spike of use in Educator Handbook across the district, but we've got to get to the point where we can establish a baseline.
And that's the work we're doing right now. And if you can imagine, again, all of this is in an effort to respond to a very specific challenge that we're seeing in our schools. We're seeing
Behaviors.
post-pandemic especially, an increase in student behaviors, more major and at younger ages than we've ever seen. And we have to respond to that. And the vehicle or the framework that we're responding is how well have we implemented our systems to address this, recognizing that it may be part of the answer, may not be all the answer, but how are we going to be able to deliver a high quality education while also in our schools being faced with different student behaviors and more of them than we've seen. That's not to suggest the wheels are coming off, but we definitely need to be very cognizant of the fact that we are exhibiting, or we're seeing in our students some behaviors that are manifesting that we need to respond to, and with their parents to respond in as well. Because while the children's with us bell to bell and extracurricular, how would the parent want us also to engage? And that's where documentation and parent engagement is key for those more major behavioral incidents.
Is that all your questions, Kim, or did you have anything else?
No, I actually have quite a few. I was giving other people a chance to speak, but questions not directly related to that particular aspect. But I mean, I have several concerns as well, and maybe we'll share some of them and you can address them and then specific questions. But you know, one concern which I've talked about before, I think MTSS and PBIS are concepts that are pushed by organizations like CASEL, by other third-party groups at much higher levels nationwide. Anytime we have that kind of a situation, I question, because I wonder, like, is this really homegrown? Is this a national effort being pushed down? That's one concern I have. I also know, I've expressed some concerns about other aspects of granted of the personality characteristics. I know this is, in essence, a quality assurance tool to make sure that we're being successful in implementing those things. I think data collection is a question and a concern I had. You've already answered that. I feel like there are concerns with PBIS specifically with rewarding students constantly for things. I don't think that that's a good idea. I think there's been studies that have shown that that actually decreases intrinsic motivation in that behavior itself. Students, they don't end up learning the value of the behavior. They learn how to manipulate the system for a reward. So we're not actually teaching them things. We're finding a problem, a solution to solve a problem we're facing in the short term, but that it can be harmful in the long term. We're not actually teaching them how to value being a good person or value good behavior. Alfie Kohn has a book called Punished by Rewards, with a lot of great points in it that he makes. He says things like I just said, extrinsic motivators are a poor substitute for genuine interest in what one is doing. What is likely to be far more surprising and disturbing is the further point that rewards actually undermine the intrinsic motivation that promotes optimal performance. Promising a reward for an activity is tantamount to declaring that the activity is not worth doing for its own sake. And again, I mentioned studies have shown that in children as young as 3 to 5 years, it's not just older kids, that it lessens the value that they place on that activity itself. I feel like sometimes the good kids kind of get punished in this system because, we're built and programmed to notice differences and discrepancies. So because of this, the idea that we're going to catch kids being good means that teachers are far more likely to notice the desired behavior in kids who usually don't behave well than they are to notice it in those who normally are well behaved. So I think that's a risk. I feel like we're skewing their worldview. Like if a student gets used to being rewarded for every little thing and not having consequences for misbehavior, their view of the world is likely going to be very skewed. And I see this in my own children. My kids want to be rewarded for everything, and it makes it harder for me as a parent, frankly, to try to teach them the value of something without, I want $5 for doing trash today or whatever, So I personally have some, strong concerns with PBIS itself. Specific questions to add to that. I mean, what are the limits on interventions? What does happen when a parent says, that's not going to work for us? We don't agree to that. What do you do? There's now the program has failed. What are our next steps? Let's see.
Chris, if I can bust in here, I would actually like you to pause between some of those so that we can hear answers, because I think there are so many that we aren't going to get answers to them,
Yeah, so maybe I'll stop there for a minute. If you want me to go back to any of them, let me know.
We're certainly happy to have that conversation around those concerns. I would go back to Punished by Rewards, familiar with Alfie Kohn's work, and it really is that debate between behavioralism and constructivism in that psychological world of how do we treat the behavior, or do we constructively, through the constructivist lens, look at intrinsic and extrinsic. I would say for us, it's a balance between what it is that we want to see and then how do we respond when students don't engage. And that varies per what we've heard here in terms of how different principals might go about that. I would say for us, it's not one or the other. It's not an absolute reward for everything. It is incentivizing some good things that we would like to see, but recognizing intrinsic value cannot be overstated. It's that affective domain. It's me wanting my kids to want to do the dishes. They don't want to do the dishes, right? But that there are some of those things where how do we balance saying how are we going to have you engage in a way that to do something that you're not intrinsically wanting to do. But it's a balance again, and I would say as far as the piece with parents, and they have the primary responsibility for their child, and so we're not going to supersede that. If we're working with a parent because a child's engaged in continual, I don't know, defiance of the teacher, or I mean, I'm just going off the office referrals. At one point, there comes a point where that child, we do have to draw a line and say the child can't continually tell the teacher where to go and how to get there day in and day out and refuse to do the work. And so I would say for the vast majority of parents, we don't hit that line. We work with them and we identify with them what's in the best interest of their child to improve that situation. I don't know that we've, and I would just turn it over if there are instances or what we've done there, but I've found that most parents are largely likely to engage in not looking at drawing specific lines.
Sometimes it just takes an opportunity to sit down one-on-one with parents and work through, because I mean, it's hard. We're not equipped with all the skills and knowledge and abilities that we need in order to be the best people we can be. But one of the things that, the behind the scenes work that we do is we spend a lot of time thinking about the function of behavior. And with our kids that manifest to that high level of need to help them with replacement behavior or a different behavior, we have to really understand the function. And when we help our school teams and our school staff and our parents better understand what that means, the function of behavior, it is a game changer in terms of our ability to progress with helping kids to overcome those obstacles, those behavioral obstacles that they're experiencing for whatever reason. And kids likely don't know why that is happening or what gets them to that point until you really get down to looking at what the function of that behavior is. And it's usually to get out of something or to get something, and varying levels of that. And then the other piece that the superintendent and I have talked about just briefly last night in the parking lot was the impact of trauma on the behavior of our kids, and not knowing what is out there in their lives outside of a school day and what they're experiencing at home, and what can we do to promote and meet the need of that safe and trusted environment for kids too. So, just a lot to think about. We've only hit like the tippy top of the iceberg of PBIS in our study session today. There is so much more to the need to address academics and behavior with all of our students in our schools, but at least PBIS presents a fair and equitable system, a fair and equitable structure, so that to the best of our ability, we're making sure that across the continuum of kids in schools, that we're recognizing kids equitably, fairly, and appropriately.
And just one more that I remember, Kim, if you don't mind. As far as national organizations, PBIS is kind of it's a national effort and very common in public ed. For those reasons, I would just say that we're not beholden to any national agenda or have contracted with any national group for us to come up with what our system is. So homegrown in terms of this is our original idea, it's not. But as we have situated it within the needs of Granite, we're taking what is a model, a framework to try to to improve behavior in our schools and found application that way.
I would contend, I guess, I still think there's better ways, better alternatives that we could try to implement some of these things. I mean, I think research has shown from what I read that rewards that are not pre-planned or known about beforehand, so they didn't know there was this reward and work for it, are far more effective and don't destroy intrinsic value like these other rewards do. Things like maybe add a social good component instead of working for something for yourself. Maybe as a class you're working towards money we'll put towards books for the class.
Okay.
Some other things like that I think could be better options than the constant rewards.
Yeah.
I think even just another personal example, my kids' school, when we had a recent food drive, gosh, it wasn't about the food for them. They were working towards an extra recess. They didn't care like why we were bringing it. They didn't even understand why. We didn't care at all, the least bit, about why we were bringing food. It was all about, we want an extra recess. So just a personal example. I'll end with that.
One of the questions I have as we go through PBIS, I understand where Kim is I think the intrinsic part, and hopefully PBIS is not just a behavior, but as it's implemented in schools, what we're really trying to do is make students feel like they're leaders, that they themselves have the power and the ability to be a leader as they go out in the world. And so I'm hoping that within the schools, if we're using PBIS like that, it's not just behavior and academics in that way, but students have a growth and an opportunity to become the leader that everyone should be. And the inside part is part of what PBIS does, not just focus on behavior and those kinds of rewards. I think you want the reward to be, I am a leader, I can do it.
First of all, Rich, I don't know what's wrong with you because my children love doing the dishes. Like, we're gonna have a chat. Just kidding. Of course they don't love it.
I've got a sink full for them ready.
Also,
But I'll say, they may not love it, but they'll come to understand the value in doing it.
well, we
You don't
pay
want
them like
pile of
$20,
dishes.
so they love it. None of that is real. In my very minimal experience in a role of an administrator, I feel like this is probably experienced by many of our elementary administrators who are also our least experienced administrators usually in our district. And that is that you got a kid coming in your office who has been flying off the handle, and your first thing is to help them manage those emotions. And if you need to do it by letting them play with Legos, you're going to do it, because you've got to so this is the thing, is those games and rewards are used as tools. They're not meant as rewards all the time. Sometimes they're used as tools, and I think it's hard to manage when it's a tool and when it's a reward, and the kid may always think it's a reward, So I just wanted to throw that out there, that I think that complicates the issue. A little bit piggyback, what's been said here. My question is, how are we teaching consequences, that there are consequences to our actions, both positive consequences to our positive behavior or our desired behaviors, and negative ones to our not desired behaviors?
I'll just refer you back to one of the decision trees. The consequences are built right in there. And the consequence is going to a next level. The reinforcement, we want the kids to stay there. And it's like you teach your children. The teachers are teaching the kids. Let's practice that. Let's do that again. Let's try this. Let's try that. And it's just that ongoing opportunity to reteach, to teach, to reteach, and over again.
And do we have a district level, something that says what the consequences are of different kinds of behaviors?
No. We have consequences that have been identified by state law for serious behaviors. But other than that, that's a school-based decision. And hopefully the consequence is reteaching and relearning and opportunities to replace a specific behavior with another behavior. Yeah.
Did you want to say
That's a
something?
tough question.
Because one of the things that I think is really important is for students to, I think that as a teacher, I always wanted to say to my students, here's the consequences of what you did, what you chose, and let me support you as you deal with those consequences. Let me help you get through these somehow. How can I help? How can I support you? You have to do it, but you're not alone. Like, I'm still here supporting you. And so while I'm the person issuing the consequence, I also am able to be the supporter. And I worry that we skip straight to supporter and sometimes make those consequences not natural enough, that we allow ourselves to undermine the behavior by undermining the consequence. I'm not sure if that actually made sense, but
Yeah.
undervalue what happened by undermine it with a smaller consequence. I think that's what I mean to say.
Well, and Julie, back to your little Lego, I understand when kids come in with behaviors off the chart, there has to be a way to calm them down, because when emotions are high, brains are off. They're not thinking logically, it's pure emotion. And so I understand that. And I think, just to reiterate what I was getting at is, if the same child is visiting the office 7 times a day and they get to play Legos every time they visit the office, then all of a sudden it becomes a play date.
Yeah.
Instead of a consequence. And that's more what actually is out there happening. And perhaps that situation just needs extra eyes on it from district people. I don't know. But anyway, I
think the behavior I was addressing was more what John was saying when a kid comes in and says, yeah, I just played Legos. And they're misrepresenting what really happened in the,
I would also say that last question when they say, are there district-wide consequences that we issue?
So we don't give schools a list, is this thing working? Yeah. A list of, like, if this is the infraction, this is the consequence. But I would say, if you look at every school's decision tree, they're very similar in nature. And I would also say that most schools use similar consequences. The question or the challenge that tends to take place is, we have teachers that set their own expectations in their classrooms as well. And we don't dictate to them exactly what they set up for each of their classrooms. But then there are school-wide consequences as well, or the decision trees that we use. How well each person navigates that, and to the degree that they do that in their classrooms and in schools, varies from classroom to classroom, school to school. The more consistent we are in establishing the expectations, teaching, reteaching, and reinforcing, the better off all of this goes, okay, for sure. So I'm not going to say, though, that it's perfect in every school and every classroom, but I would say that we do the best we can to continue to provide the supports and to teach in the principals and the schools and give them the resources to do so. We obviously have students, individual students, that come from a wide variety of family situations as well. And so how much support they're getting in their own homes with the same things that we're trying to teach and reteach varies as well. And that's a continual challenge.
One thought too on the consequence decision or the intervention decision or the support decision, there's really two big components: is what exactly happened, why are they here, what's gone on, and then to Karen's point, how frequently is this happening, or how many interventions have we made to try and correct this behavior? Those are two important considerations. So if you're not taking that second consideration in mind, and you're just repeating a similar intervention every time, you're probably not going to change behavior. So sometimes it might not be a real significant problem that happened, but because of the number of interventions that have been made, the efforts that have already been made, there might be a more severe consequence or a heavier intervention or a longer lasting intervention than perhaps maybe if it hasn't happened many, many times.
And I had one more question, comment, observation. I think it's really important that as we look at this, that we make sure as adults that we are following our PBIS and our characteristics of graduates of Granite. I've been substituting in schools, and I always use some time to just say, hey, tell me about your school, or tell me what you think, what should we do differently? And students always come back to respect. I'm really surprised at how often they talk about how they feel disrespected. And comments are things like, I can't go to the bathroom without having 8 people tell me to get to class. Or on the elementary level, I still don't understand, isn't COVID over? Because what they were expressing was at school, they still have to sit on one side of the table and socially distanced. And like, I'm not going to do anything bad with my friends, but I would like to get to talk with them during lunch. And so I think that we need to really look systemically, because we're so interested in making sure students behave that I think sometimes we don't give them the opportunity to demonstrate their skills. We take away that opportunity for them to show that they can have integrity and show that they can be respectful. And so I think that's something I'd really like us to I think all it takes is a principal thinking and a staff thinking through that, because I think there's improvement to be made in every single school.
Just a couple thoughts as this discussion has emerged. Hopefully we can feel a sense of how complex and multifaceted this discussion really is, and we're just touching the tip of the iceberg with it. One of the greatest and leading indicators of teacher attrition within the first 5 years is classroom management as one of the top 5 reasons, and student behaviors. Now we're talking about those tier 2 and tier 3 behaviors, a very small portion of all of our students who need to be taught how to engage, and we make explicit that teaching in terms of expectations, how to behave, where to behave. You saw on the Truman expectation school-wide, things like Kai Foodie. Kai Foodie's fun. Keep your hands, feet, and other objects to yourself. We teach what that means. And when we think rewards, I agree. We need to have a healthy balance between intrinsic and extrinsic. But even an extrinsic might be recognizing a child who is keeping their hands, feet, and other objects to themselves. Good, when they're walking down the hall. The vast majority, good job. I noticed how and it's just an acknowledgement at that point in this PBIS of the teacher acknowledging good behavior. I see it. Sometimes it is a ticket. Sometimes it is, those things play into it. Sometimes it has to have a healthy balance, and it can't be always that extrinsic. It has to be intrinsic. We want you to engage this way, and I would hope, given any incident, we're always communicating, and that's really the big crux of this also. Any of this is the why behind the what. Why do we want you to engage this way, and what does that mean for you as an individual? So as we think about, again, the growing complexity, I would say this, the growing complexity of some of the behaviors that we're seeing even at younger ages, we just need to make sure that we are responding in such a way that honors the child, includes the parent, and provides teachers and administrators the resources that they need to be able to make sure that learning is occurring at a high level on their campuses, and some of the behaviors, some of these tier 2 and tier 3 behaviors aren't disrupting the experience on the campus. Because it is talking with our teachers in my site visits with administrators, we may have those instances where a very small portion of students is taking up a great deal of time. We're happy to invest that, but we need a framework for how to engage that child and teach that child what it is that they need to know and how they can be successful. And so that's where, coming back to the expectations, teaching explicit expectations, why we have these expectations, and when they're being followed, how do we acknowledge that and reinforce it by saying, good job, thank you for walking, not running in the halls. Thank you for having your hall pass. Those types of things, reinforcing even through verbal acknowledgement of a job well done. But then being able to respond and say, you know what, there are some behaviors that are occurring in our schools that we need to have a different framework, a tier 2 and a tier 3 involvement effort. And so as we think about the conversation we've had here, if we want to go deeper on some of those items specifically, trauma-informed behaviors was one of them. I found under that umbrella, a lot of the behaviors that children who have experienced trauma exhibit when they engage and act out in class and are doing things that they shouldn't and really hurtful things. The reason why they're doing it actually breaks my heart more than it makes me upset, mad. It breaks my heart versus making me mad because I know something more of where they're coming from and what it is that they've experienced, and how we address that is very different in many ways. And so if there are topics you want to go deeper on, we're happy to bring back information items to the board. Per the board's request, we're happy to do another study session and go deeper on some things. We'll always leave that door open to continue in this very multifaceted and complex challenge that's in front of us.
I just want to ask follow-up on that. Is there something that we as a board what can we do to support positive behavior in our schools? Is there something more we should be doing, or how can we support you, Judy, and all of you guys who stayed late today? Thank you.
I think that you are supporting us by this really rich discussion. I mean, when I sit back and think about what we've been able to do here, this is evidence to support that you can institute a framework district-wide from one side of the valley to the other, from the north to the south, that's consistent and coherent and a comprehensive system that really does meet the needs of our kids. And to see that come to fruition in a meeting like this is just very impressive. I don't know that there's another school district in the state that can have a discussion as rich as this about behavior in our schools and have school board members who are as knowledgeable as all of you are, and who are researching and studying and listening and learning. I mean, that's pretty cool. I think that's something to really celebrate. The superintendent always asks us to bring a celebration to the beginning of our meetings. He's even got Rick Anthony asking for celebrations, and that's pretty cool. And to me, as tough as having a conversation like this is, at the same time, it's a celebration of great things happening for kids because of the high level commitment we have to doing right by kids in Granite School District.
Yeah. And I would just point out, part of it is communication as well. And I can't overstate this, our schools are amazing and they're doing amazing things. When we're talking about some behaviors in our schools that need to be addressed, this isn't campus to campus, every grade level, every class. This is not that, but this is a handful of circumstances that we need to be able to respond to and address. Our schools are wonderful places with wonderful learning occurring, wonderful engagement from students to student to teacher, a lot of respect, a lot of amazing things happen. So I don't ever want to make it sound like things are not that way by bringing up this topic. And at the same time, though, we need to address what it is, a complex challenge that we have.
It's a testament to that we care about every single student.
So for my part, by the way, Julie, I was that teacher that was telling the kids to get to school or to get to class, and I got cussed out today in the bathroom, just FYI. Literally.
I've been that teacher too.
But I appreciate what Kim brought forward, and I do want to kind of reinforce what she was saying, because I've heard it from my own kids that, there's kids who, the reward for this quarter for no tardies or for, only 2 tardies or whatever is they get to go to a movie. And once a kid gets 2 tardies, well, it's too bad. I guess I'm done. So they just are tardy forever for the rest of the quarter. And having those maybe, I guess, surprises, or the ones that, hey, at the end of the quarter, hey, we're going to look back and say, oh, look, you did this, and having the reward kind of not something that they're working toward, but something that just happens afterward. I would really like to encourage that, because I think that is a very valid point, and I've seen that, like I say, my son said that as far as in his school.
That goes a long way.
Yeah, so having that mix of it, and I will say, I do hear a lot of teachers as I'm in the schools, they do the verbal rewards, oh, thank you for, so-and-so for sitting quietly on the rug, and thank you for standing quietly. I appreciate so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so who are standing quietly ready for lunch, and I can see that this person is ready and that they have all their stuff ready. So there's a lot of verbal rewards going on, and I do see that as well. So I do want to say, 4 years ago when this was introduced, I did not see a lot of this in the schools, and now, like I say, I see it everywhere. So kudos to your team and for getting that out and having that there. I think from what I'm hearing from Karen's comment as well as Kim's, I feel like maybe the place where it's breaking down in just some of these areas is that where, like on this, I love this decision tree too. I think this is fantastic. But where it says, did it work? And when it says no, we're not moving to the second step. We're not moving to the third step. We're just going back to the first step. If it doesn't work, if the kid's back in the office for the 7th time that day, then it didn't work. So we need to go. So I think maybe just we'd like to know as a board that this is happening, that we're reinforcing this with our admin, that we're going through this. And I know admin have a lot on their plates. I get that. But that needs to be reinforced. And I think that's kind of part of, and I'll own it too as a teacher. Teachers sometimes forget to reinforce these expectations as well. And I think elementary teachers, kudos to them, because they do a fantastic job at establishing expectations and teaching expectations, and sometimes secondary folks, we just do not. And it's a good reminder that as secondary teachers, we need to also not just reinforce expectations, but establish those expectations. I was reminded that when they said, semester 2, you have new kids, do they know your classroom expectations? And you're like, oh, I guess they don't. You're right. I need to go over that. So it's a good reminder to also help these teachers. I really, especially our secondary folks, not that they do other fantastic things as well, but I really think that maybe we need to focus that on our secondary folks, that let's make sure that we are reinforcing these expectations, because I'm seeing some of those, like especially attendance behaviors, we're not reinforcing those because I'm seeing that. We're seeing that in our hallways, right, as we walk through these schools. So anyway, that's just some of my thoughts. The one other thing is I don't know how well we're getting this message out to parents. As we talk, I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but like in a community council meeting or even PTA meeting, and sometimes we'll say, oh, well, the PBIS for this or whatever, and parents go, what? What is that? And so maybe that component needs to be also part of what we push out a little bit more. Hey, parents, do our parents know that this is, skyhawk soar? What does soar mean? My kids know it. Do I know it? And when you asked that, I was like, oh, I know it's soar, but I don't know what those mean. So when you handed that to me, I was like, okay, good, that is what it means. But, do our parents know that? I don't know that our parents as a whole, I don't know, do you guys feel that we're...
I have one principle, Eric Bailey at Oakwood, who every single time he sends any communication out to his parents, like he'll say, thanks to the PTA for this, and then he'll put something like, Oakwood Owls are respectful by thanking those who help them, and then he'll put hashtag owls soar,
I love
which is
that.
their thing. And so those parents, I've started using it with my own kids who do not go to that school.
I love that. And I think there's some schools that are doing a great job at getting that out, and there's some schools that, like, I mean, I see it when I walk into my
They're
kids.
just not that creative.
They're not elementary kids. That's what it is. I think elementary are much more creative and much more communicative in that way. And honestly, it's the secondary
I'm
ones.
just joking.
No, but I think there are some schools that we could maybe step that up a little bit. So
I agree.
that's my 2 cents worth.
Can I speak to that real
Go
quick?
for it, Ben.
We do have actually a PBIS flyer that Stephen had created prior to, that's in the back of our parent handbook that we do share district-wide. And as she's given some samples up here, a lot of this is content that we've produced in behalf of schools as they've kind of shared some of those visions of what that should look like, and branding that to their respective school and network, which I think is tremendous as well. But tying it just always to PBIS is a stretch, just like it is trying to remind a parent what a lockout is, or all the other 16 pages of content that we have in that handbook, right? Which is why we continually present the information so when those questions do come up, because invariably there's a lot to cover, and it's hard for our parents to always be acquainted with the things that we're engaged in.
Sure. And I get that. Like I say, there's a lot on administrators' plates. I just really want parents to understand that this is, hey, look, this is what we are, even if, I love that he does that with his emails. I think that's brilliant, and it's just such an easy way and a simple way to push that out and make sure parents understand, and that, I mean, I walk into the school and I know what, Skyhawks soar. I understand Calvin Smith's. I get that, and I know I see Bunyan's roar, and I see the Taylorsville. I get it, and I see it. But as a parent, if I were not in that school, would I know? I don't know. It's a good question. So.
I just want to share the latest thing I got from Eric Bailey said something about we're really encouraging kids to take the RISE test, which we know principals have to really talk about that. And then he put Oakwood Owls can do hard things. Owls soar. I mean, it's just he uses it in every fashion to get the parents to push those values as well.
I think Eric Bailey should do a professional development of the admin thing. Anyway, is there any other, you don't have a microphone, Clark, but do you have anything to say? Clark came late, by the way, but we'd like to welcome him. Glad you're here.
Probably better off with that microphone.
Can I just make a specific request for follow-up? We didn't really touch on the kids who get overlooked because they behave well anyway. Concern that I had, how we tend to focus on differences in behavior, so the kids who wouldn't have typically behaved well typically get more rewards, and the ones who behave well. Yeah, if we can just take that away for something to discuss later.
All right, thank you. Any other thoughts, questions, comments? All right, Judy, thank you.
You are so welcome, and thanks for the
Thanks, team.
opportunity. And thank you to everybody who has had questions, who's weighed in, who's had responses. It's been an excellent meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We appreciate your work on this and your team. Pass it on to the ones who aren't here, but we really appreciate all you guys do. All right, and that is all we have today.
I motion that we adjourn.
Second.
All right, we have a motion to adjourn in a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Meeting adjourned.